live. So we'll let, I'm going to get started. People will filter in. I know there's a big crowd usually on LinkedIn and a big crowd on YouTube. So hello out there. And we got Brian and JP here. They're our anchors week after week. So appreciate that. Joel, thanks for coming on. As a little bit of background, I met you through a buddy of mine who I go back with. I wish I spoke more with Steve, but Steve Hodgman and I, we used to play soccer together in middle school. Him and his twin brother and the three of us were good friends for a long time in high school and whatnot. And so he introduced me to you. And I usually do some a little introduction, but you have a very interesting past, and what you guys do are very interesting. I'd love for you if you could just mention a little bit about where you're coming from and what you guys do currently at Stash.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we're trying to basically democratize finance and bring wealth building to everybody in the country. We've been at it for 10 years. It's one of the reasons I actually left. So before this, I was at Goldman Sachs.
Never heard of it.
Surprisingly, I didn't before I started.
Interesting. They may have liked that.
Professor. He told me about it, and I met him. But yeah, it was one of the reasons I had left, because that's not the background I come from. I come from a trailer park in Michigan. It was a way different environment. But yeah, I was like, why aren't these tools that everybody else gets available to everybody? Like, why can't everybody have their money work for them? And I met the founders of Stash at the beginning, almost 10 years ago now. And we've been on that mission ever since, just bringing these tools to everybody. Essentially having like a financial advisor in your pocket, like breaking this taboo of finance, letting everybody have a piece of the pie in the American dream.
Wow, I love that. And before I get into questions, which really I want to chat about AI, Stash, all of that, but you brought up something very interesting. You said you're from Michigan, and you said a trailer park is where you grew up. How do you tell me a little bit about growing up in that environment and how you got to where you are today, whether it shaped you or not? It doesn't have to be some crazy story, but I'd love to hear a little bit about that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I've been growing up. I actually didn't get a computer until I was in high school because like they were too expensive at the time. I think the first computer I got was like a Pentium 3. It looked like a Nintendo cartridge. Yeah, somebody actually I was playing soccer with, their family was like getting rid of a computer, and so they gave it to us. And it was like broken, and we had a neighbor, because like in the trailer park community I was in, like everybody helps each other, everybody has some skill. One of them worked for an IT company, and he helped me learn how to like fix computers. And so like that started my journey on computers. I just fell in love with it, and I wanted to learn how to program it. I eventually ended up going to school for it, and then I came to New York to do my master's degree in computer science. And I met a professor that was like working on some stock stuff. And he was like, yeah, you can go knock on Goldman Sachs door. And I was like, I don't know who that is. But I went to a job fair, met them, did what they call a super day, which is 8 hours of interviewing. Interned there, and then I worked there for a number of years, and then came over to Stash.
Are you able to share any bit about that 8-hour session? What was that like with Goldman?
It was intense. You meet with many different like groups within the company. Some of them are like brain puzzles that you might find at like Google, where they're like you have multiple boxes and they're labeled differently, and it's like, how do you approach the problem kind of scenario. Other ones are more like security style, like if you're programming against something and you have multiple databases in different regions, like how do you make sure that everything's synchronized. And I eventually ended up falling on a team that was financial risk. And so it was like, how do you deal with risk? And that was a huge thing. Like it was a huge learning curve. And like it was very interesting to see how they did it internally to make sure, because their whole thing was like reputation is everything. And so like you need to protect the market, even though it doesn't seem like it on the outside. Like you need to protect the market and the people in it to protect your reputation. So you need to do the right thing. And so like the financial risk team made sure that like everybody trading and doing things like withheld this standard.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Actually, I know what you mean. I mean, maybe some haters out there would say, "Oh, Goldman," but I mean, Goldman, that's their reputation. When you say Goldman, the second you start breaking that reputation down, people start not trusting you. It's out the window. They'll go to, Merrill Lynch, anywhere else, and then those names will be the new Goldman. So, anyway, sorry to digress there. That's a fascinating background, and I know that the viewers like to hear a little bit about people's backgrounds, and that's fascinating. Well, let's get into a few questions here. So you mentioned about democratizing wealth creation. How does AI now help carry that forward as you manage literally billions in assets?
Yeah, it's brought us something very interesting because like for years, even from the beginning, like democratizing this meant like not only bringing all those tools, because like we brought fractional shares essentially to like the masses, so like you can finally break in because like a lot of people don't have $1,000 to purchase one stock of Amazon, but like doing small little increments, like instead of buying a, they always say this, instead of buying a cup of coffee, like put this in investments. But like it does add up over time. And like that's actually the first time I started investing, even though I was at Goldman, like staff was the first time I started investing and actually saw that grow. But a big piece of it was like education and advice. Because like if you can actually like teach somebody to do something, like it's better than just like doing it for them. Um, and we always had this like goal in the back of our heads to bring like a financial advisor to everybody's pockets, essentially. Um, and we created tons and tons of content to help and learn. But that's where you like start seeing things over time. It's like you created all this content, but like how does it reach the person? And you could have old traditional AI techniques of like trying to have like recommenders and like lookalikes and like point people to content. But like a lot of times you need it said in the right way, you need it presented in the right way. And that's where like AI really gave us like superpowers because like now you could have these deep conversations because like finance conversations have always been taboo. Like we've all been in those conversations where you're like too embarrassed at times to be like, I should know this and I feel like everybody knows this and I don't want to say what I want to say. But like with AI, like you could just say it, like just say what you want, ask the questions you want, and like let it talk to you. And if you need to dive deeper and say like, well, explain it to me like a sixth grader, like you don't have to feel bad about it. You say it, it explains it, you know now, and you're better off for it. And so it's been a huge jump, not only for that like front facing piece, but the back facing piece also of just like learning who a customer is, how to reach them, what are the real needs. Like you gather data all the time, but it's like that qualitative data, everybody kind of like skips on. They want the numbers to be like, are we moving this needle? But that qualitative data like really speaks to like what the person really wants and needs. And like by taking that and using it, like it takes it to the next level and you're like really there for that user's financial journey. So that's the hope, is to like keep that going and like really be that piece of somebody's financial journey.
Are you guys fully run by AI? Is it like an AI first company, or is however you want to put it? I'm going to keep that open ended.
We're heavily invested in AI. So like over the years, we built this huge core of staff that, like I said, offers all of these tools that like the few typically have, but like now we have it for everybody. And so like building on top of that has made it really easy. But like AI allows us to go deeper than what the core has. So the core offers us tons of stuff. Um, but yeah, just being able to track a person, and be there with them. And because like the way we built our architecture for AI is kind of like an org chart, like a virtual org chart. So we needed ways of reasoning with it internally, reasoning with it externally, and like how do we measure performance and goals. And so like we structured it like an org chart. And so everybody gets their own basically sandbox virtual org chart. And so yeah, that's what allows us to do a lot of things now. And it's with them on their financial journey as they go. And so it evolves with them. So if you start off and you don't know what you're doing, and you really need hand holding and support, like this thing is there to start with that. And as it sees you changing and evolving, like it steps you up as you go. So it's kind of like that teach a man to fish proverb.
Completely. When you said what you said earlier, I thought right of that proverb, which is definitely an accurate one. When someone just like walks me through something, I'm never going to learn it. You just are like, oh, this is great. Someone's doing it for me, but you got to teach them how to do it properly. So, how are you speaking about learning? I don't think this is an original thought by any means, but amongst many barriers to embracing AI within a company is also education around AI. How do you guys manage that internally?
It's been a journey.
I bet.
Because you have a lot of hesitancy at times, especially when it first came out, because we're used to traditional things. I think somebody once said in the company, like, people are afraid because they've used like the Verizon chatbot, and it just like circles and circles, and you don't know what to do. Um, so it has been difficult at the beginning. I think things like ChatGPT and Gemini like have eased that process as you get more people using it. But not only was there like this fear of like the technology can't do that and like why are you using it? Let's use traditional means, but also that fear of like losing like your position or your job or your value. But like as people start using, especially internally with us, the more and more they use it, they see that it takes kind of the mundane stuff out of your life that you don't normally want to do. Um, and so like it gives everybody superpowers in a way. Um, I think we recently just had a case like internally outside of just the finance piece, with like marketing. Like they're always looking at different campaigns and how people are behaving online to like best target people. It's like, oh, they could just put it into like a special database for the AI and let the AI come over it and ask questions about it. And like instead of them spending all day on it, like they could just come in and then go on with their day.
Right.
It,
I think when people, especially when it's ChatGPT and how limited ChatGPT is, but how powerful it can be, you're like, this thing isn't replacing me, but it's doing some cool stuff when used appropriately, or it sometimes flies off the wall. You have to be aware of that. Do you have any internal courses that you recommend for people to take your employees or the people you work with? Do you do anything internally, or is it kind of like giving them some direction and hey, just play around with it and you'll learn about it?
Yeah, we have a couple things we do. One of them is just like starting with like the security compliance side of things. It's like everything we use, we make sure that we check and validate before, because these tools are powerful, but like they're in their infancy and like we're giving it access to a lot of stuff. So like we need to check, they have the checks and balances to make sure it doesn't go off the rails. But we also do a thing internally in the company that we call lunch and learn, because we're mostly a remote company. We all get on like a call every like week or so and we do a lunch and learn. And sometimes we have companies come in, like last week we had Cursor come in, and kind of just go through like, how do you use Cursor? What does the AI look like? What are the ups and downs and things? And we even have non-engineers at it because, like I said, some of the marketing people are like, I want to get my hands on it. I want it to interact with our systems. And so they're using it too. Um, so the lunch and learn is very valuable. And then we use some of the traditional things like Confluence and stuff to just like drop docs for people to read. Um, and we're exploring the MCP tools, the Model Context Protocol, but internal facing tools,
Mhm. Mhm.
using some tools like a Goose from Block, because it's like Cursor can have a learning curve to it because it's a programming environment. But like you're used to the ChatGPT and the Gemini, but you could have a local model like Google's Gemma, 1 billion parameter one that could do a lot of stuff. It doesn't take much memory on your computer. And so we're playing around with having internal services that tie with these that allow everybody in the company basically to speak to our entire system, all of our documentation, all of the different tools, mixed panel, things like that. So they can get all these insights without having to know how to query a database or go and get access to certain things. So it is changing a lot of things.
Fascinating. Yeah, I think once people see the power of it, it hits you over the head especially when used appropriately. You're like, wow, this really is the real deal. This can really help me. But when used inappropriately, yeah, I mean, you're going to fly off the handle, and it's going to take you to some weird places. But I guess that's some of the fun of AI. But like you said, you're putting guardrails on, you're putting things, and you guys are all about security. So these guardrails keep everyone in place. So internally, it sounds like there was adoption, but there's various levels, maybe from both an internal and an external. So internally within the company, and then your clients being external. What does trust look like when it's mediated by AI, and how do you impart trust to either your clients or internally? Like, hey, you can trust this thing.
Yeah, that's also been a journey for us because we started with 3.5 GPT, which was just kind
Nice.
of the general, like there's no tool calling or structured output. It was just kind of like complete this sentence kind of thing. Um, so when starting off, we noticed like it's hard to curtail it and get it to go where you want it to. And so like early in the process, we brought in our compliance team because we're like, you have to deal with people doing things all the time, like not computers doing things, but people doing things. And it's like, what is your approach? How would you handle this? And so like sitting with them, watching them go through conversations, data, everything, like seeing how they did it, we took that information and actually distilled it in the first place, starting off to have a compliance model. And so we trained our own model on top of it, so fine-tuned the model to basically be our compliance officers.
Cool.
And by doing that, it gave us our like first layer of protection. And it's really robust and powerful. And so like even outside of the app and like what it speaks to users, like we use it internally. So it's like copy. Like copy usually takes a long time if you're a developer, especially a front-end developer, to get that copy. Um, if you can pass it through this first, and it's like, yes, it's pre-approved, you can move much quicker. Um, but as you might know, we are a registered investment advisor. So like that compliance piece was a big part because we have to work in the best interest of customers. So we have to ensure everything we're saying is proper. But then you have to take it a little bit farther, and that's where that architecture came in, where we have that org chart architecture. And so we build these boundaries in. And so like the external facing piece, we think of like some kind of spokesperson for the company that speaks on behalf. And so we build in the personality there, and then we put a lot of guardrails in place. So like if somebody comes in saying something bad, we think of like how a person would handle it as a spokesperson. And it's like, oh, hey, let me curtail this a little bit. And the same thing coming back out, like we need to make sure everything we're saying is valid because it needs to be compliant. And so there are different layers of checks and balances to check these things off. And a lot of them rely on traditional techniques of like AI. But some of those hard pieces that AI does give you a superpower for is like you're not gonna create a if-else statement of or a hierarchy of millions of different probable words and entities that might come in. You could basically ask the AI, like, is it semantically similar to XYZ? And if it is, you kind of funnel it down a different path, and then you could do additional checks on top of it. So yeah, these are some of the things that we're doing. There's a lot of things under the hood that happen that might be a little too technical, but it's an interesting space when you allow people to freely speak to systems.
It's fascinating. I'm sure these conversations, if you were a fly on the wall with the GPTs, could be fascinating. Just what people are talking to the GPT, Chat GPT about, and how they're using it internally. That is fascinating. There's been a thought, and this may not apply or may not even be at all relevant, but there's some talk about using AI to as compliance for compliance checks for AI. I always think that's kind of a funny, interesting idea. Um, is the regulatory space changing so quickly for you guys that AI being part of the compliance would be important, or is the compliance something that you guys just will manually at this point bring in and then train the AI on the new compliance whenever that happens?
Uh, it's a mix. It's more of like a confidence check that we have to do. Um, it's surprisingly good. It is a hard like human thing to be like, well, if we change something, like how do we know that the artificial system will handle it right? But we have these things like it's statistical measures of like confidence in sampling, and so like we have sampling in like everything we do. And it gives us a measure of like how the grader is doing. And so by doing the sampling, we could get a good measure, but we do try to conform to like kind of like what the strictest requirements might be. And we think that's a better approach than just saying like, what is the requirement today? And it's like, let's think of what the requirement that is that's strict and go towards that, because like we know we're working on the best interest of our customer and the best interest of the company as a whole. And so it's a mix. It is hard. I get it. I know a lot of people will say like, how can you just let the AI do what it does? But again, if you have a measure on it, if you have checks, and like we don't do everything AI, and we're not like AGI proponents, but we're like little micro decisions we can make, and we can validate the little micro decisions.
That's beautiful, and that actually parlays so beautifully. This was scripted, obviously, Joel, between the two of us, because that went perfectly into my next point. So, what don't you use AI on, and how do you make that? What's your litmus test of I should use AI for this, I shouldn't use AI for that? That's definitely something listeners are generally interested in.
Yeah, it's essentially a complexity measure. Like I said, we do micro decisions, and like we also have Stash as a core that already does things, and it's pre-programmed, and it's code based, and it has validations for it. And it's like, it's kind of like when OpenAI was trying to do the strawberry test and like count the R's in strawberry, and it's like they gave a lot of examples to it, but like big question philosophically, like, is it counting? Can it do math? And it's like, we're not gonna like put those to chance, especially with people's money. And it's like, if we can make a small decision, like a good one is like if you want to make a purchase, which is a feature we're planning on rolling out soon, letting the AI take more action. But we spend a lot of time on it because like we don't want the AI to assume things or hallucinate something. And so when you do ask a question like, give me the price on Apple and like make a purchase of $10. Like when we ask the AI is going to give us structured output. And so we're just asking it explicitly at times something. So the explicit ask might be like, here's a company name. What is the ticker for it? And is there like some kind of price that they asked for? Once we do that, we could take those values out and we could do like a double check. We can not only let the AI decipher it and give us what we want, but we could also use like traditional NLP techniques and say like, was this value actually in the data or not? And then before we make that purchase, we go back to the customer with a confirmation laying out with the text that we've created ourselves, like not generated, with a confirmation and a confirmation key. And like, we save the data, you give us the key back. We're not letting the AI decide like, here, let me do this purchase. Let me call the API myself. We'll do that work for you. And so it's great. Like code is fast, so you don't have to wait on the LLM to do things. But you're also using the LLM in cases where it's like, if you did get that text in, like how do you actually break it apart? Like you let it decipher the text and its meaning. And in some cases, you do have to like fine tune the meaning to fit where it should go and route in the right direction. Yeah, minimize as much as possible, I would say.
Is as much of a layman way that you could put it, which it's hard to do, I'll admit. Can you explain and obviously not giving up any IP or anything like that, how do you guys make sure that my personal financial information, I'm a client of yours, doesn't get into OpenAI's hands or whatever LLM you're using? Well, name it. How do you protect against that?
It's a multi-pronged approach. So when the first case is obviously like when you're making a contract and calls with these companies, like you make sure you set up the contracts right where they can't retain data, they can't train, which is like your first guard. You can only feel as confident as the contract at that point. but we also minimize the amount of data going to these language model calls. And that's why another piece of like minimizing the decision making and like what happens with LLMs is a key. So like if we send off a request to make a decision and give us a structured output for something small, we don't have to send the entirety of your information and your data to the LLM. We can just say, here's a snippet, which makes it like more concise and easier for it to reason with to begin with, and give us a response back, and like we'll retain as much data as possible. And then the other piece is scrubbing. And so like we have identifiers, like there's tools too. There's a couple tools we use. A big one is the Microsoft Pseudo. I don't know if I ever pronounce it right, but like they have traditional NLP like scrubbing techniques, and we can look at certain entities and then we'll actually transform them into something different and kind of mask them if we do need to send something. And then we'll use that kind of data afterwards.
Super cool. Really well explained. I don't think I ever explained it as well as you just did. We get that in the AI agent world all the time. Like, how's my IP, how's my IP being used? And there's so many ways you could explain it, but you did such a wonderful job of explaining how you protect people's, in this case, financial data. That's wonderful. So I'm going to look back quickly, and then I want to look forward, and then we'll kind of move on to some other topics. Looking back, when did you guys start using AI? Were you like kind of the first ever to use AI? Were you in the middle? I mean, still now is pretty early, but what would you say?
We were pretty early. We actually had a prototype of like kind of a chat messaging type system. When was it? 2018, I think. And this was using like the old style NLP techniques. We had a fun name for it because we have this like internal hackathon culture. And we created this system called Speakeasy, which allowed you to speak to the system. And we wanted to actually like deploy that on like Google Homes at the time and Alexa, so you can kind of talk to your finance. And that was like our early stage. But I think immediately after OpenAI had released their first model publicly that was like capable, we started building. We started building that proof of concept. And so we technically, I'm sure some people might be able to argue it, we're like first to market in the financial space with one of these agents out there. But it was a very interesting time, so we didn't know how far it could go and what the capabilities were. We were trying to boil the ocean a little bit, but it has been fun.
Yeah, you guys must be learning on the fly, like I saw, but you were really early on and one of the at the forefront of it. It's kind of an obvious question, but I feel like asking it anyway. How much has the technology changed, or not necessarily your use, but the technology around how easy it is to implement AI or how to make AI more robust? How much easier is it today than it was when you guys started on 3.5?
Leaps and bounds. Because even going back farther before that, like OpenAI, to give them credit, they did a lot to like democratize the AI space, particularly for generative AI. Because before, if you've ever had to deal with it, like TensorFlow and PyTorch, and like getting deep in Python and making sure you're on a GPU or a CPU, like you don't have to do that anymore. And it is so great that you could just send a request and yeah, have it process essentially. And you can see these companies too are learning as they go, because if you look at their API structures that you do hit, they've evolved so much. Some of them are a little clunky because they've evolved so much, and some of the stuff isn't valuable anymore, but it's still there and they have to keep it, and they're creating version 2s of it. But it has grown leaps and bounds, and like it has made it so almost anybody can do it. Even if you're not even an engineer at this point, like you can kind of vibe code in ChatGPT or Gemini or any of these other ones to get to a point where it can start making requests to them. So it's astounding how far they've come in the last couple of years.
Fascinating. And now let's look ahead a little bit. First, anything that you might be able to share in 2026 that is on the horizon for Stash AI wise, and then let's look like 2027 to 2028. You get any wish you want for any AI that you can make. What does that look like?
Uh, it looks a couple different ways. Because like as we've gone through this adventure, you might have heard of it. It's called like the blinking cursor problem,
Hmm.
um, which like everybody has, where it's like you have this prompt and you can ask anything, especially in finance, where it's like you can ask anything, just ask it, and people are like, I don't know what to ask. And it's like if you were sitting in front of somebody, you would just ask them potentially, uh, but like they don't know what to ask, and so we had to keep evolving. And so we had the chat initially, and then we introduced a feature where it would like try to predict what you might say next based on like who you are, what you've said before, what other people are saying to help. And like that helped move the needle a little bit. But then we were like, well, people need visuals. And so we built this like agentic feed, which looks at you holistically. And it's like, what might you need in this moment? And then give you a button to carry that conversation into the chat. And it's like that helps the next step. And so it's like each piece you keep stepping forward a little bit. And so I see like the next year or so, like stepping even further, like more of a fluid like UI rendering piece of code where the AI understands how to just render UI. So it can just show you what you need in time or show you the graphs you need to like understand things. And then moving even further into like the multimodal aspects of these language models. And so it's like you can point it at like say a car and be like, I want to purchase this car. Then the AI can say, let me recognize what this car is, the make, model, whatnot. Let me look at your financial habits in your life. Let me look at your credit score and see like, can you afford this? What things might you want to cut back on if you do want to have this? And like, are you getting a good rate on this particular vehicle? And so like that really like blends into your financial life where it's like this one-stop shop AI that knows you, knows your finances, and can tell you like this is a good thing for you to do or this might put strain on you. Um, and like you see some of those things coming out too with like Meta with the Ray-Bans and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like you could just be wearing this and it's automatically can connect to like your stash account and connect to the AI for it. And just your day to day, and you're like, remember that thing I passed on the street and there was an ad for it? I saw like 20 of those ads. Like, put some money into that company. It seems like they're going somewhere.
Super cool. That is fascinating. And I mean, that would be the dream for, I mean, day traders, investors, whatever. Like you're just walking down the street, going to your next meeting, and you see this ad for something cool. Okay, I'm ahead of the game. That's fascinating. Do you guys actually plan to have wearables be part of your moving forward with your clients? Maybe internally, but externally for your clients mostly.
Potentially, we're exploring many different avenues because it's hard to know where this is going next. We still haven't even broken to the voice piece of it yet. Um, because like it could, like I said, like having a financial advisor type thing in your pocket, like if you could just even talk to it like you're making a phone call. Because we did have a like a proof of concept that we wanted to work on, and it's in our little backlog to try out, but it was like the phone mode where you are in chat. If you do put it next to your face, it just automatically turns into phone mode and behaves like a phone conversation. Because there are many ages and demographics you have to like try to fit in, and that's part of that like personalization piece. But like if you are the demographic that likes making phone calls versus like typing on something, then yeah, put it up to your ear and have the conversation. We want to meet you where you are.
Well said. Meet the client where they are. Do what the client wants. That's always the number one goal. And that is very interesting. You nailed exactly what I was kind of thinking when you were talking about using voice. It's going to be a generational thing, which is crazy. For at least I can speak for myself. I think we're in a similar generation. Like, of course, I would rather speak to someone. I'm not saying I want to speak to everyone on the phone all the time, but to speak to an AI advisor, like that would be so much better than typing. Like, I don't do that.
Okay.
But the generations below us, it seems, are very ingrained with typing, and that kind of thing will be turn them off. So it's going to be pretty interesting. And how I always, and this is just going to be one aside, and we can move on. How we're trying to make these things AI, not things AI, as human as possible. But that's what humans are like now. The generations below us, they're not like not human beings, but they interact differently in with mediums and social media and whatnot. So what that human looks like is very different than the humans who are even older than us, who only want to talk on the phone. So it's great that you're meeting as many clients as you can at all levels and just trying to go across the board. You can text, you can call, you can do anything, just work with us. And we're going to do a great job for you. That's it's really wonderful. Great to see that. And listening, listening to the market, listening to your clients. It's always a
Mhm.
good thing. So do you see AI replacing financial advisors altogether? Is there a piece for having a financial human advisor going forward when the technology, maybe this is 2030, whatever, but is there a place for humans, or is this just, hey, we should be doing AI financial advising all the time?
Yeah, I can't say for like the far off future. I feel like it would be something to come back and bite me, but like I don't see it. Every time we talk internally about it, I see it kind of like the calculator in a way, um, where it's like it gives you assistance. It takes away those mundane tasks, and it also gives you like some assurance on pieces of things. And so I think that people will need to learn how to use the tools, just like the calculator. Because it's like I don't want to have an accountant or a tax advisor that's like, I'm going to do it all up here and on a piece of paper. And I was like, no, you use the tools you have to make you more efficient and more accurate. But yeah, I don't see it going away. And you hear a lot about like hallucination and like we're getting rid of hallucination, and it's like these models are based on like humans and like human neurons and how they hold information, and it's like you're not going to get rid of hallucinations unless like everybody in the world agrees on everything, and like
Ha.
I don't see that happening. So
Yeah, I'm so glad the part of deep neural learning being just like the human brain as a medical doctor fascinated me. It immediately, I'm sure it makes sense to most people once you take a second, but that's exactly how the human brain works. Immediately, I was like, oh my God, like this makes perfect sense. This is exactly how it's done. So I'm
mhm,
glad that you brought that up. Some people don't really realize, like, AI is really just a foundation on humans. It accentuates the really good sides and the really dark sides of the deep web, deep fakes. It accentuates that, but it's still a product of who we are and what our brains can really come up with. And the brain is
mhm,
the best thing that we have by far. It holds tons of data. It's an insanely efficient system compared to computers these days. Our brains, anyway. We don't have to
yeah.
go into that, but it's wild how efficient our brains are with so little energy that it's using. It's wild.
Mhm.
So going back to humans, how do no matter what, we all want a human touch, whether it's we're texting, we're talking, whatever the medium is that we're getting through to Stash. How do you keep that human touch in products that are increasingly guided by machine intelligence and machine learning?
So that's where like the personality piece of it comes in. So when we were actually building those like front-facing models to like interact with users, we spend a lot of time putting that human touch in it. Um, and we're not like teaching it what to say necessarily. We do teach it like its generic style, but then we teach it kind of like how to learn to best fit the user, if that makes sense. Um, and so we teach it how to look at data. We teach it how to interpret how the user speaks to it. Because there's like this practice in psychology, and I don't remember the name of it exactly, but like there's this like form of flattery that people have when you kind of like mirror their talking style.
Mhm.
It resonates with them.
In
And
sales,
so,
it's a thing. You mirroring is a thing in sales. Absolutely.
so yes, yes. And so like taking some of those techniques and like building them in so that the model knows how to speak to users. And it's like I can take this like raw data that's rough and might not be understood, and I can translate it into like how this user is. And at first it might sound generic. It might sound like just like a stashed generic model. But over time, as we learn you, we see how you speak to us, we see how you behave. Like it should transform to fit you. And so when you go to it, it should resonate. It should be easier to understand.
To add on and picking up that thread, that's the basics. Then you get the empathy. I was asked yesterday, I was just out to dinner with someone. It was more about the medical field, but anyway, just about when is AI going to find empathy? And then there's another question. And I said, actually, AI's, when trained appropriately, is by far the most empathetic. It's way more empathetic than humans just on its consistency. So I was
Mhm.
basically just telling the story. I beta tested some for this cancer community support network. I beta tested pro bono one of their AI chatbots to help cancer patients when before going in with a doctor, they could have a sounding board for what questions they should ask their medical oncologist and everyone else on their team. And what occurred to me is, look, I like to think I have really good bedside manner, but I have bad moments. I have bad days. I have bad weeks, bad months, bad seconds, whatever it is. But for that patient, it's an N of one when I screw up. When
Mhm.
it comes to AI, they're not, I mean, unless something flies off the walls, and whatever, but it's going to be consistently empathetic and consistently do its job every single time,
Mhm.
when done appropriately. So, it's funny, like, I think the empathy and the human aspect is there, in also in sometimes a creepy way when done correctly. There are other issues worth discussing, but yeah, I couldn't agree more, Joel. This could be my last question. Then I'm going to open up for if there are any questions out there with those here. And if not, you've definitely given plenty of time here, Joel, and I can't thank you enough. But if you are able to, are you able to share a recent tough call or internal debate about AI's role at Stash? And is there anything you kind of learned from that debate?
Yes. So that blinking cursor problem with the feed was a big debate. Because it was in the early parts of the AI too, where it was like we could see the people that were using it at the time, like how much value they were getting. We had some people that would come back like every day, and like they started their day off by just having this conversation, checking the market, and we could see how valuable it was. But like moving that needle and trying to sell at the early point to be like, yes, you're not getting these like quantitative marks, but you can see how deep the qualitative piece runs, um, to push forward and like try new ideas. That was like such a hard push at the beginning. And so trying to show that like those little steps of like, yes, we have this blinking cursor problem, but like, what if we introduce that next piece where it like assists them in the next step? Do we see a bump? And can we use that bump as like a measure of like the right trajectory versus like how many people clicked on this button today? Was a huge push. Um, but then actually like putting in the feed and trying to sell the feed itself, because it was doing a lot of stuff. It was looking at the user holistically, like what are you invested in across the board? What have you done in the last X amount of time? Like a lot of different data points. And so like it took some time to get that stuff, and it needed to be able to talk to our whole ecosystem in an agentic way, so it's thinking itself and making these calls. And so like it took time, and it took time to render each piece, and then like the cost of it was a little bit higher because it had to take so many turns. And so like trying to solve that made it even harder to be like, we showed that visual representation helps a lot of people. This is going to cost more and it's going to take more time. And like that's usually, if you tell people it's going to cost more and it's going to be slower, it's like an immediate like no. uh, but like it was a hard sell to be like, let's try it. And so like we did see a bunch of stuff from it, and like the qualitative piece, it can't sell that enough. Like the qualitative data you get from people is so valuable. And so like seeing this come in, like we had kind of like pushed some of the education to a different part of the app, but like seeing in the feed render and seeing how people talk to it showed us that like, oh, they actually want more education. They want to know what to do. Like we thought like, oh, we're not showing the right investments to them. It's like, no, they have this yearning for knowledge. So they feel comfortable in finance. And so like that's helped us like direct where we're going.
Fascinating. I did say that was my last question, but I do have one more because you brought up a question that Everyone loves the answer to this. And you brought a very interesting piece into it. ROI, so return on investment. How do you make that decision of if the ROI is there internally for you? You mentioned qualitative versus quantitative. How do you, and quantitative can be really hard, especially with how short a term AI has been around, even though you guys have been doing it a while. How do you weigh those and how do you determine the ROI and is this worth moving forward with?
Yeah, it's just piece by piece. Um, it's interesting using AI, and some of it here is a human call. Uh,
It is.
because you want that hockey stick. Everybody wants the hockey stick. Um, but like it is a weight between how many people are using it, what is the retention on using it, um, but also trying to get a measure on that qualitative data. Like if you're seeing that people are asking questions that just don't even make sense, they're just kind of hammering your system or not directed in the space you want, like maybe it's not a good return. But if they're constantly asking questions where they're like, oh, like, why did this happen? Or like, I'm interested in, like, tell me about what an ETF is and why it's valuable. And then you can connect it and see that they made a purchase later. Like, that's where you start tying it together and you see the trajectory. And so you're kind of like calculating a lot farther out than you would normally calculate out with traditional paths.
That's awesome. One of the best answers I've heard to that to this day. That's awesome, Joel. I really appreciate that. No pressure from anyone who's out there. We can call it quits a few minutes early. I'm done talking. I don't think anyone wants to hear me talk anymore. So if there are any other questions for Joel, chime in now. Just come off mute, or we'll call it quits. Cool. I'll take it that everyone had such a great time that there are no further questions. You answered them all in advance. Yeah, no, this was great. I really, really enjoyed this session, Joel, and really appreciated your time. Thank you so very much. Is there anything before we sign off that you want to tell the audience or anything? Or
Oh no, this has been great. Yeah, thank you so much.
cool, Joel. Thanks so much. Give my best to Steve when you see him. Give him a hug for me, and we'll definitely chat soon. I look forward to staying in touch.
Awesome. Thank you.
Be well.
Bye.